on today, two broadcasting icons who, put Madden on television. Sandy Montag, nobody, trust me, unless it's Barry Frank, who passed away a year or two ago, nobody in America knows John Madden better than Montag. That I can promise you. And he'll join us later on today, too. And we'll try to get a player on from the old Raiders, having issues with that. A lot of them are no longer with us, which is a shame in itself, but we're trying to track down somebody who played for John in the 70s. We'll see if we can get that done here in the course of our day. I'll start with a little monologue here on John, and I'm going to treat it here, not his gargantuan personality and his business acumen and his the video games and the All-Madden team and Thanksgiving Day and Pat Summerall and all that. I'll let Shaker and Ebersol take care of some of that. I'm going to start today with what he wanted to be known as his whole life, and that is a coach. If you noticed the statement that the NFL put out yesterday, and they broke the story, and how shocked were we all after we saw the Christmas Day video, Christmas Day Fox special. 3 million watched that, by the way, which is a good number on a Christmas Day, and of course they're going to air that again tomorrow, Fox at 8 o'clock, the same one that you saw on Christmas. But how ironic was it? We talked to Rinaldi, we did a lot of it in the last couple of days, that right after that doc gets done, and remember, John taped that in the summertime, is part of that documentary that Rinaldi directed. He passes away at, at 1 o'clock Eastern time in the afternoon. It really is it was just so hard to believe after we spent a lot of time on John in the last 4 or 5 days. Regardless, the statement that the NFL put out brought up the word coach. John, nothing was better than his life than that Hall of Fame induction in 2006. And he considered himself a coach. I mean, it all began there, more so than it began with, diving through paper mache with light beer commercials. He was a coach. He went to Cal Poly, 57 and 58. He was all conference defensive lineman and an offensive lineman. In those days, they played both ways. Chuck McNorrick had done that for the Eagles. He played in, I don't know if he went to college with him, but his boyhood idol was John Robinson. Of course, coached USC and the Rams. Hurt his leg, had a bad injury, got drafted by the Eagles in the 21st round. Never played in the NFL, went back and coached at Allen Hancock College. Don't ask me where that is. Somewhere in Northern California. Coached there, went to San Diego State. Gilbert Coriel coached San Diego State, had a long conversation and ran into, in those days, Al Davis. Al Davis brought him to Oakland to become a linebackers coach. John Rouch, I said John Ralston, that's a bad job on my part. I said that yesterday. John Rouch coached the Raiders for a couple of years and left after the Jet loss in January of 69, when they lost at Shea, 27-23, and then the Jets went on to beat the Colts. Rouch left, went to Buffalo, and Al Davis made John, at the time, the youngest coach in the NFL, of course, at 33 years of age. I don't know who was younger when he began his coaching career. Schuler in the early 60s with Baltimore, or John with the Raiders in 69. But Madden began a great, illustrious run coaching the Raiders, 69 through 78. And then he retired, and then, of course, told us at the time when he was 42 years of age that he'd never coach again. True to his word, found his second calling as a broadcaster, and away we went. But again, he's a coach. First ever game was at the Oakland Alameda Coliseum. The Raiders, a 33-year-old head coach, beat the Oilers 21-17. Wally Glenn coached Houston his first, and that was the first of 103 regular season wins for Madden with the Raider franchise. He won 112 overall, 9-7 in the postseason, but he won that game, of course, against Houston. His first loss came in Cincinnati against Paul Brown. He lost 31-17. That was in early November. He was 12-1-1 that first year with that Raider team, and I used to kid him about that, and I was fortunate, and I'll get to me a little later, not that I'm important here, but I used to kid him about, how did you lose to Kansas City at home in the AFC AFL Championship game? The last such AFL Championship game, by the way. And he said, Chris, I said, yeah, John, we played him 3 times that year. 3 times. What do you mean? Yeah, we beat him twice in the regular season, and we also played him in preseason. I said, you played the Chiefs in preseason? He said, yep. And in those days, preseason was much more significant. They played 6 games. was much more significant than it is today. Thank God it isn't as significant. But we played them 3 times that year, beat them all 3 times. They came in Oakland, they beat us 17-7. What were we going to do? So that ended John's first year with the Raiders. John coached in 7 championship games in the AFL. He was only 1-6 in the games. Again, that was an iconic period of football. He had the Dolphins 1 year on the road, he lost, and they won a Super Bowl. He lost 1 year on the road to Baltimore, they won a Super Bowl. He lost to Pittsburgh on a couple of occasions. He lost 3 times to Pittsburgh, and in all 3 times, let's see, I think he lost the Immaculate Reception. It was not a championship game. He lost 3 games to Pittsburgh, 2 in the Immaculate Reception game, which was a divisional game, where then Pittsburgh lost to Miami. And he lost 2 championship games to Pittsburgh, 1 in each spot. And Pittsburgh went on to win a Super Bowl both those years. The only time that he lost a championship game in which the victor did not win the championship Super Bowl was Denver. Last game John ever coached in postseason play. Rob Lytle fumbled going into the end zone, but Denver beat the Raiders 20-17 in '77. Then they got ambushed by Dallas in the Super Bowl. But John's illustrious career with the Raiders is really, in a lot of ways, captured by all the incredible games that Raider team was involved with. And it obviously took place a little bit before John got there as the head coach, because they had a crazy game against the Jets in the Heidi Bowl, which they scored 2 touchdowns in the last couple minutes. Beat the Jets 43-32. That was Rodgers last year. And of course, the Jets got it back in the AFL Championship game. But think about some of the games that John coached in postseason play, really overall, but in postseason play. I mean, the Sea of Hands game, the first playoff game that Miami lost in 2 years with the Clarence Davis, the aforementioned Immaculate Reception, when in those days, they would not catch a pass if it was deflected off an offensive player. To this day, who knows? Franco picks up the loose ball, touchdown. Skitters beat the Raiders 13-7. How about the ghost of the post with Casper in overtime when Stabler hit him in Baltimore 37-31? How about the roughing the passer penalty? This one went for the Raiders. That was the game, of course, in which Sugar Bear Hamilton, I thought it was 4th and 18. I looked last night, I watched the Raiders America's game year in '76. It was 3rd and 18, and then Stabler scored with 14 seconds left, 21-17 final for the Raiders. That was the year they won the championship. How about the Holy Roller game? That was in John's last year when Stabler threw the ball in the end zone on the ground as a fumble, recovered by Oakland in the last play of the game, and Jack Murphy, a rule they changed, which you can't advance a fumble based on that Holy Roller game. And of course, that was one of the last 9 wins that John had gotten in the regular season. But think of all those unbelievable games that John coached in over that 8, 9, 10-year period. Now listen, he had some heartbreaking losses. I mean, there's no way around it. He lost some home playoff games too, but he had some unbelievably high moments. The 2 games that are interesting, and I'll take a break and then I'll get to a couple things. The 2 games with John that was fascinating that he's always talked about. One of them I had remembered last night. In '76, the Raiders played Cincinnati in Oakland on a Monday night. And if the Raiders did not win that game, Pittsburgh would be knocked out of the playoffs. The Raiders were secure with home field. And then the Raiders would have to deal with the Bengals, who were not as intimidating, of course, and not their nemesis as the Steelers were. Well, the Raiders heard all the talk all week about how, they should better off lose this game to get Pittsburgh out and not worry about them and let the Bengals win the AFC Central. Instead, the Raiders basically buried Cincinnati. I think it was 35-21. They won the game comfortably. It may have been 35-20, but they won the game comfortably on a Monday night. Very proudful game. One of the proudest games that John ever coached in. The Raiders basically, beat number on them. I know the score was not indicative. I remember the game well. They dominated the game. And Madden told me many a time, pound for pound, that's the best team, that's the best game my team ever played. Consider the opponent. He's a coach. 13 after the hour, we take a timeout, we continue. We're at Mando. Matt, you're a good football fan. Let me get your thoughts on him. Go ahead.
Dog, for me, somebody growing up in Long Island being an Eagle fan, the 80s with Randall Cunningham, when Madden and Summerall were on the call, you knew it was a big game. I mean, I was privileged to a lot of 9 and 10 games. But anytime I got to see an Eagle game, when there was no Sunday ticket and all that kind of stuff, I was in for a treat, whether it was Eagles Cowboys or Eagles Saints in the early 90s. What Madden did for the NFL, I mean, what he does for kids in general, I mean, I got my son playing video games right now with Madden 22, and I mean, what he's done for the sport. There's never going to be another guy like that. And dog, I've been with you from the beginning since you made the move from FAN over to Sirius, and having John on at 5:05 on Friday, I mean, to me, that doesn't get talked about enough. That to me is one of the best spots you've had 3 years in a row. I mean, you got a lot of great ones. The Peter Kings, the Irish of the world. I'm a big Gary D fan, but having John on those first 3 years and him breaking down those football games on a Friday afternoon for about an hour or so leading into the weekend, I mean, it's never going to be anything like it. I know Brent was a big contributor as well. Brent was on with JT the other day, did a tremendous job with John. But what John meant to the NFL and, guys like myself who, out-of-town fans who really got to hear him, week in, week out for big games, there's never going to be another guy like it. And I'll tell you one thing, watching that Christmas special, all cooked up in the house on Christmas Day, that hour and a half, I mean, that was fantastic. I recommend it to anybody who hasn't seen it yet, dog. So, Happy New Year, and I'll talk to you next week.
All right, Eric, what a job Ronaldo did. The 2 boys came across so well. Phenomenal. We'll do one more, then we'll get Ted Shaker up. Dr. Falcon in L.A., let's listen to him. Doc, good to hear from you today, pal. What's on your mind? Take it away.
Oh, man, I'm old enough to remember John Madden's last year in 78. I don't remember the Super Bowl 2 years earlier in 76, but I remember those misfits and the ability to put the cast-offs together to go with a few Hall of Famers. That's his greatness, man. Whether it was John Matuzak, whether it was, number 60 from the University of Mars, Otis Sistrunk, Jack Tatum, and then you had the Hall of Famers, Tim Otto, Marshall, Gene Upshaw, Cliff Branch. I mean, not Cliff Branch, Biletnikoff. Cliff Branch is in the Hall of Fame, by the way.
Didn't Branch just make the Hall of Fame? Maybe he did. He should have. Branch is Hall of Fame.
No. I agree totally. But I think the fact that, when you mention great coaches, for some reason, his name doesn't come up along with the Bill Washers or Joe Montana or Tom Landry with Roger Staubach and all that. I think Chuck Noll with Bradshaw. But when Kenny Stabler and John Madden had that magic, man, Coach Madden said to himself, if the game was a blowout, Kenny Stabler, the snake, was bored. It had to be a fourth-quarter thing where they needed to score. That's when Kenny Stabler, the snake, came alive. You're talking about clutch performers, And it's one of those things where I got into an argument with a Steeler fan, on that immaculate reception. I don't think it was a catch. I think it hit the ground. And John Madden, to this death, said that was the most disappointing thing. He didn't get an explanation at the end of the game in 3 Rivers in 72. Yeah, drove him nuts.
Not 100%. Drove him crazy because he didn't get an explanation from the officials in court in New York for verification of the rule, I'm assuming. I've said this 1,000 times. I'm going to say it again. First off, John took a while to get in the Hall of Fame because the Raiders were good before he got there, and they were good after he left, and they had Al Davis. So it took him a while. That's number one. Number two, I've said this 1,000 times, and that's right in my wheelhouse. For my money, I'm telling you right now, he's top 3 or 4, life on the line, game-ending drive, fourth quarter. I can't think of too many, and that includes Brady and Montana. Logically, I can't think of too many who I want being my quarterback in that spot. That's how good he was. That is how good he was. He made plays in those spots. coincide. Let's move this along here today. We got a chance to talk to our good pal Teddy Shaker. He, of course, CBS. Haven't talked to him in a long time, and he was part of that doc last week. And he says hello, Ted. Thank you. Always a pleasure. Teddy lives in my hometown, so he's about 5 feet away. How are you, Teddy? Things good?
Is it raining there?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Ted, good to have you aboard. First off, when John left the Raiders, were you at CBS at the time? Let me get a little history about you and John, late 70s, early 80s. Go ahead.
Yeah. I went to CBS Sports in 1978 as associate producer. The first time John worked with us was during the Super Bowl. It was in Pasadena. It was the LA Rams against the Pittsburgh Steelers. That was the game where Bradshaw won his fourth.
Right. The two great passes in the fourth quarter. 100%.
Yeah. So what we did, it was actually Mike Pearl, who was the producer of the NFL Today, and I was the associate producer. Mike Pearl said, why don't we get an AFC coach and an NFC coach? One, we'll have, pretend to coach the LA Rams, the other coach the Pittsburgh Steelers. So we got John Madden to do the Steelers, and we got George Allen to do the Rams. And so the idea was they would break down the game with certain video, and I would go edit the videos and then come back. That was the first time John worked with us. Funny story associated with that. George Allen was so competitive that this was a TV show. That he would come. I did the edits at TV City, which was the CBS broadcast center in Los Angeles. He would somehow get into the building and find me in an edit suite. This is George Allen, to find out what John was doing.
Oh my God.
With the stadium. And and so I would say, Coach, you can't be here. You got to get out of here. So I walked him out of the building. This is a huge building with tall ceilings and long hallways. And so I'm walking him out of the building. This is apropos of nothing. I'm sorry. But anyway, it's pretty funny. So George Allen, as we're walking, is telling me how he is going to have the Rams beat Madden Steelers. And he stops in front of this big pile of cardboard boxes that are against the wall. He pulls out a black Sharpie and he begins to diagram plays. I almost started to swear there. Plays on these cardboard boxes, explaining how he was going to have these plays that would have his team beat Madden's team. Now, other people are walking in the hallway. These are crew members and whomever, and now a crowd gathers because the great George Allen is here drawing plays on cardboard boxes in the middle of this building. Anyway, that was my first time with John.
When was it? Did you see talent right away? Did he Did he blow through the screen in that little pregame show in '79?
No, yeah, he was terrific. He was never bad. He was always good. And he was unsure about whether he wanted to do TV. So he basically got talked into it. And what we did at CBS, it was a group effort, we were unsure of how he was going to be. So we put him with different play-by-play guys, and they would do games in that first season that didn't go many places, so that he could learn the business. Others, in our business, take somebody that's a high-profile and they put them right in the number one spot, and they basically fail in front of the audience. Tony Romo is the only guy who's kind of pulled that off. Everybody else failed. So John learned the business that way, and he worked with a number of different guys, and over time, we began to see the potential, and then it came down to whether he'd work with Vin Scully or Pat Summerall. And the guy that was running CBS Sports at the time was a guy named Van Gordon Sauter, and he pulled a group of people together in the conference room, and we all voted. And
Really?
And the vote was
not convinced, but as it turned out, you can't argue with it. When you started with these games, I'm assuming this is the next year. When you started with these games, Stockton and Lindsey Nelson, all these announcers, did you do so trying to groom John, or did you do so just to see if he had the ability to do the games? Which one was it?
It was a combination. I mean, it was a chance for him to learn without falling on his face in front of the national audience and learn the business well enough so that when he played to larger audiences, they saw the brilliance. And so, you don't just walk off a field and go up into a booth and become John Madden. It took some time, but not a lot. And the rest is history, to use it cliche.
Now, the decision with that Dallas-San Francisco game, you went Scully Stram, yet John did the Super Bowl with Summerall. Explain that.
I think the thinking there, and that wasn't my call then. I was running the NFL today, but I think it was a chance to let them end the season in a good way, and because everybody was hoping. I mean, Stram wanted to be the number one guy. Ben was interested in being the number one guy, and the decision went the way it went. And so they, as a way to show our appreciation to them, they got to do the NFC Championship.
Wow. So CBS, that wouldn't work today. CBS basically threw those two guys an olive branch. That Detroit, that Super Bowl in Detroit, it was a huge snowstorm. Everybody, it was a tough time getting to that game at the Superdome. That is John's first. Was there any trepidation that the game could be too big for him?
No. I think everybody knew who he was and what he could do and what they could do. And so it was not an issue. We had made the call and we were going to go with it, and it turned out to be the right call.
It did. Now, you had him. How did Summerall? Let's talk about him for a second. Let's take a quick break and do the back end of his script. Did Summerall? Did he know John? Was it a case of listen? If he's going to be the play-by-play guy for Madden, he's going to be on the number one team. He's going to keep his mouth shut and do what he has to do. But you got to have a certain. He loved Brookshire, so they took Brookshire off and they gave him Madden, who's bigger than life. Had him down quietly. Did that bother him? Give me a little feel on him.
I think Pat was, the ultimate team player. I think Pat loved the idea of doing these games, and he was so good at it. And he recognized, because these two guys, I mean, John was with all his, kind of bigger than life, bang, boom, boom, going through a wall to get a Miller Lite. He was one of the smartest guys in the room every time. And to me, he was somebody who was one of the great communicators, I've ever heard. I mean, ever heard. He could, in his own way, describe anything so that anyone could understand it. That was part of his universal appeal. As far as Pat goes, I think Pat recognized he was with someone that was as gifted as he could be, and that Pat himself was, Pat was like a Russian literature major. I mean, he was as smart as he could be too. These are two guys who I think recognized that working together could be something that would be historic in certain ways. And so he definitely he missed his friend Rookie. There's no doubt. But he recognized that this is the business and the evolution of the business, and John was the best at it. And so that's who should be with Pat, because Pat's the best at it. And the combination worked.
Ted Shaker, we're going to continue with him in a sec. And you just heard Ted's background. As good as it gets, he's a great guy. On John Madden. We continue in a sec. Don't go away, Ted. We're back after a quick break. Don't go away. Continuing with Ted Shaker. Great to have with us. Ran CBS CBS forever, knew John Madden forever. Dick Ebersol a little bit later on. Sandy Montag a little bit later on. We're trying to get a Raider player on if we can find one. Ted, if he, not surprised he didn't in AFC since he coached the Raiders, but if John didn't have the NFC, and remember, the NFC in the 80s, you got the Giants with Lawrence Taylor, New York finally won a Super Bowl. You got the 85 Bear defense, monsters of the Midway. You got Montana with San Francisco, that iconic team.
Yep.
You got Gibbs in D.C., one of the great all-time coaches. Who's also got a San Diego State connection with John. So you got a lot of perfect scenarios for him to blossom. If he didn't have that, and instead was dealing with the Orange Crush and Dan Reeves and some of those teams in the AFC, would he have been as successful?
I think so, Chris. I mean, one of the great things about John Madden and his team, he attacked Bob Stenner, Sandy Grossman, the camera crew, the tape operators, the graphics people. They were part of the Summerall Madden team. And one of the great things about John was, we had a game that was a blowout. It was shown that people stayed. And why do we think they stayed? I think they stayed because of Pat John and the team underneath them that fed them all that great stuff that they were able to use to keep it entertaining and keep the audience there. So I think that John was going to star no matter where, but I don't think the NFC was part of the reason for his success. Having great games definitely does help for sure, but also when you have games that are lopsided or lousy, people stayed because it was entertaining and informative, and it was John Madden and Pat Summerall.
How shocked was CBS and how shocked was John and Pat when Fox swooped in and stole the rights in '93?
I would say pretty shocked, but I had gone by then. I left in '92, and what I do know is that when Murdoch was making that deal, they were going to. The first thing he was going to do was get John Madden, and I know in Atlanta, the Super Bowl that year was in Atlanta, and I was down there doing something for Coca-Cola TV, and I remember talking to John, who was there, and he was in talks then with Fox, and they were all going to go, and it turns out they took Pat, they took John, they took Bob, they took Sandy, they took Richie Zions. I mean, all these guys who had been part of the Madden team. So they recreated what had been a really winning combination and just moved it to Fox.
Explain to the audience how much John loved football. I mean, it really is. We understand about going through paper maches or Miller Lite. We understand about Tanakin and all that stuff.
Yeah.
He's a tremendous pitch man. We understand that. But at the essence, he loves football. I mean, did he look at it 24/7 going through game films when he was locked up at the Dakota or on a road trip when he got to the city 5 days before game time? Give him a little sense of football preparation, Ted.
Oh, you know what? It was his life. When he accepted the induction into the Hall of Fame, the Football Hall of Fame, he described it as, he never worked a day in his life. He said that between being a player and then a coach and then a broadcaster, football is his life, and he never worked a day in his life. He lived it, breathed it. It was everything to him, and it benefited immeasurably. You listen to some of the comments being made by Commissioner Goodell last night. About how important John was to the growth of football. That was John, and it was all because of his love of the game.
Could you see anybody today who would be able to move around to all the networks? I mean, he worked for ABC, he worked for NBC, he worked for Fox, and he worked for CBS.
Yeah.
I mean, if CBS lost survived with all these changes of who got what games and who owned what rights. Could you see anybody today? I mean, that's a very unique quality. Could you see anybody today doing that?
I don't see it. And I could be dead wrong, and oftentimes I am. But no, I think John is the most consequential broadcaster, I think, in the history of sports, and he changed it. His opinion of coverage of the NFL, television coverage of the NFL before he joined CBS was the coverage was a mess. People would sit over there at the Dakota and place watching a game, and he would just sit there and say, I can't, why are they so tight? I can't see the 11 guys. I mean, all that kind of stuff. He changed that. He taught us. He taught the camera crews. He taught the videotape guys. He taught men and women and kids in the audience. He taught them to love and understand the game better than they had before, and that was immeasurable. And I don't see anybody that could be the next John Madden. I think he's a one-time guy.
One last thing, Teddy, was the CBS executives concerned when he was never going to go on a plane again, and you had to make sure you got him to game via Amtrak or the Madden Cruiser?
That was part of the deal, and so everything had to be figured out. Sandy, you talk about Sandy Montag. One of the things John did is John found people around him that he thought were really good, and he made them part of his team. Sandy Montag was a $50 a day stats guy. He worked in the graphics department, of John's games, and he found his way to becoming close to John, and John loved Sandy, and Sandy began being part. One of the things Sandy did, he'd be on the train with him, he'd be on the Madden Cruiser with him, and Sandy then developed into someone who became his agent, and then Sandy turned into being one of the most influential agents in the sports industry, and it started when he met John, and that's pretty cool.
So, in other words, when he doesn't want to go on a plane anymore, CBS has got to figure out a way to get him from LA to Chicago for next week's game on Amtrak. What'd you do? Would you rent a car? How'd you do that before he got the Madden Cruiser? How did that work?
It was the train. They were on train. He said he would never fly again, and he never did. And he had serious claustrophobia and stuff. And so part of the scheduling of games for Summerall and Madden had to do with how do we get them there in time. Well, they'd leave right after the game, and they'd catch a train to God knows where. I mean, that's how it worked. That's why it eventually evolved into the Madden Cruiser, which had a life of its own.
It sure, yeah, unbelievable. What an incredible man. It really was. Ted, great job today. Incredible man. Incredible man. You did a great job on that documentary. You gave us some good stuff. Stay healthy. Happy New Year. Good to talk to you again.
Yeah, stay healthy too, and you and your family.
All right, Ted Shaker, thoughts there on that. Great to have him with us. How about the George Allen? George Allen sitting there. I got to beat this son of a gun. And nobody knows. And it's 1978, 79. And that was the game. The Pittsburgh, they were near the end. And the Rams were 9-7. Youngblood had the broken leg against Tampa. They won 9-0. And that was the game that the Rams had them in big trouble and near defeat. And Bradshaw made those two great passes to Stallworth over Rod Perry. And Pittsburgh ended up winning the game 31-19. They trailed 19-17 in the fourth quarter. That would have been January of 87. We continue with Phil Simms. Stick with us. Taylor loved him, and he loved Taylor. He loved greatness. Nobody's better than LT at the linebacker spot. Talk about that.
Well, yeah, he did a great job of illustrating great players and showing why they were great and all those things. But yeah, Lawrence, John Madden had a way of connecting with everybody. I think Bill Parcells trusted him and, well, let him do anything he wanted when he was around. He could walk in the locker room, do anything he wanted on the field, talk to players during practice, which a lot of coaches just say that is a no-no, but he was allowed to do it. And, he had great connections with player. Of course he loved Lawrence Taylor. I'll tell you who else he loved. He loved Carl Banks, too. Many times I heard him say on broadcast, Carl Banks might be the best linebacker in the NFL.
Oh,
So
really?
to say that,
Wow.
yeah, he did say it. And I know he said this during our Super Bowl run in '86. Carl Banks is playing better than any linebacker in the NFL. I know he said that a couple times because Carl Banks in our 3 playoff games in 1986 was really, truly unbelievable. And I don't think people realize that about him because Lawrence is such a huge figure and Bill Parcells and everything else that goes on that he kind of got lost there a little bit. But Carl was truly all 3 games. You could almost say he was the difference in all 3 games.
Bill, Giants hadn't won in 30 years, 56 to 86. Was
Right.
Bill nervous with John around at the Super Bowl in Pasadena, or did Bill let John do exactly what he wanted to do? They had the game. How did that work out there? Let me hear.
Free reign, big guy, on the practice field, hanging around, lunch, sitting there talking to everybody during lunch, after practice. People would go on his bus and talk to him. Bill was great with him. And like I said, he gave him free reign with the players. I would come in every game, I'd say, God, they want to talk to me again. This is the 4th week in a row. We had the Met and had Summerall. Yeah, they want to talk to you. So I would go in there and, I trusted him and I felt very comfortable with him. We'd have lots of laughs, but I would get on the board, the chalkboard, that's what it was back then, and draw up plays that we were going to run that week so John would know why we were running them and all that. And they would write it down and Bob Stenner was there, Sandy Grossman, and all. They'd write all this information down, and it was cool. And I trusted them, knowing they weren't going to tell anybody. And the fact it just made them. Well, I look and say this. It made them be more informative and really explain why we were doing certain things with players, and that was pretty cool to be able to do that.
And I know Parcells loves Summerall. I know Pat's the ex-Giant, but if I'm not mistaken, Bill and Pat were very, very close. Isn't that correct, Bill? Tell me about that.
I don't know that for sure. I would think so. Pat Summerall was always, listen, even in my rookie year, I had Pat Summerall and I think Tom Brookshire. I'm not
Yep,
sure.
that's
Yeah.
it. That's it.
Well, even my rookie year, Pat Summerall, there was a connection going on. He was, having a good time with this first-round draft pick from Morehead State. And, he would say things, and I've actually watched some of those games over the, probably over the last 10 years, and I have laughs just about one. The quality of the broadcast and the cameras, it's like we're blurred compared to nowadays, but Pat was really, of course, an ex-Giant and really kind to us all the time. And he was a tremendous person. I never saw him in a bad mood. He, always cordial and everything. Pat was just a great dude. And like I said, when they came around, it lifted everybody's spirits. We knew it was a big game, of course, but the energy they could help create with you was also real too.
And I think probably Madden loved those Giants teams. I mean, because you were sort of you were a workman-like team. No big stars. You were a workman-like, underrated quarterback. You weren't a guy throwing the ball all over the place, a la Marino. You had a suburbanite offensive line the first time, then a big bruising offensive line the second time. He liked punters, and you had a great punter in Jennings. He loved defense. So there's a lot about that. You were not a flashy team, and John didn't love the flashy teams as much as he liked the blue-collar teams. That probably helped, right?
Well, I think so. I think he really had a great feel for who we were and how we played, and he admired that. And of course, he really liked Bill Parcells, and Bill was, a lot like him, full of personality, maybe a little more direct and cutting with his words than probably John Madden was with players. But Bill, that was his great. That's why he was a tremendous coach, because he connected to everybody. I don't care who you were, where you were from, what race, it didn't matter. What economic background, he could relate to you. That was his great quality, and I think him and John Madden had that in common. I always felt that about, I didn't know him, but Coach Madden, just the way he acted on the sidelines, the reaction of players to him was really special. And I think it was the Bears, us, Washington. Dallas had to run with Jimmy Johnson late in my career. Just everything, just all those. I heard you talking earlier in San Francisco. Man, he was in the hotbed of pro football. There were 6 or 7 teams that he was going to be doing one of those games every single week. And like I said, sometimes we had him 3, 4. I don't know if we ever had him 5 times in a row, but we had him a lot in some of those years. And it was always good, always fun to see him.
Did he recognize, last thing, we'll take a break in some games this week,
Yeah.
Did he recognize the brilliance of Belichick at that point, the mid-'80s?
I don't know if he did. He might have. I'm sure he was very in tune to it, and they always talked about him in broadcasts. I remember that. And, Bill was, I'm sure, talked to them, told them a lot of great stuff. Bill Belichick was always good in production meetings.
He loves it, and he loves the history, so he probably loved the fact that the Raider coach was in that, in the facility on a week-to-week basis. Belichick, of course, was the defensive coordinator of the Giants the year that they won their first Super Bowl in 1986. Let's take a timeout. We're going to take a break, and then we're going to get back to you. We're on Mad Dog Unleashed. Don't go away.
It's Sims and the Mad Dog.
Get to a certain point, they can go to Tennessee and win that game. But, COVID issues and do this. About this in my next book is just somewhat ridiculous. I mean, George Allen's in the Hall of Fame, and he went to one Super Bowl. Now he has a 71 winning percentage, but he barely has 100 wins. Marty Schottenheimer isn't in the Hall of Fame. He has 200 wins. He's only one of 8 human beings on the planet that have 200 wins. But we qualify as going to the Super Bowl as the monumental achievement. We view Banks a 500 coach. He's got 2 championships, one as Super Bowl, one as a conference. But he was a 500 coach. So I think there's so many different variables. I mean, Jimmy Johnson, certainly I think he deserves, and I've talked to a lot of people for my book about this, he's in the Hall of Fame, I think, as much as a team builder as he is for a coach. He didn't coach that long in the NFL. And he didn't amass that many wins in the NFL. So, when you look over what he did, I think the hardest part for Matt was, we talk about these great Raider teams, but he truly was in the middle of the Steelers storm. I mean, this Pittsburgh Steelers team was damn good. It was really good, hard to play, hard to beat, and they kept bringing back the same team every year. So, he gets criticized for not winning more. But yet, when you look at that era, the 70s, it was dominated by the Steelers Chuck Noll team.
100%. Weave Eubanks an interesting case because he won maybe the 2 most historic games in history, and throw in 59 where he went back to back. But other than that, a lot of 500 stuff. But he won with Namath and he won with Unitas in 58 and 68. That probably gets him in, Mike. What's your take on that?
Yeah, no doubt. I think he belongs in. I think he belongs in because he advanced the game. I mean, he was the coach of the greatest game ever, right? And then he was the coach of really what merged the leagues together with the Jets beating the Colts, And so I think just those 2 things alone. I mean, when you look at Namath's career, you say, does he belong in the Hall of Fame? Well, when Namath was playing, interceptions were kind of normal because there's so much man coverage. People threw into it. They threw it down the field. So I think you have to be very careful of understanding the era. My only point about Eubanks is I think that Schottenheimer belongs in the Hall of Fame. Now, you can say he wasn't a good playoff coach, and that's fair. However, to win 200 games, Dan Reeves, for example, he's not in the Hall of Fame. He's not in the Hall of Fame as a player and as a coach, right? And this is a man who's in the top 15 on the all-time winning. He's won Super Bowls, took different organizations to Super Bowls, right? And yet he's not been able to get there. And so George Seifert, Seifert's in the same category as Matt. He won a lot of games, over 100 games, more than Walsh won 2 Super Bowls, and his name's not even mentioned. It's a very political environment, Christopher, that I don't think is somewhat fair to some of the coaches. And I think that caveat of, you've got to go to the Super Bowl is a little bit not understanding how hard it is to win games in the NFL. You win 200 football games in the National Football League. You are really a hell of a coach. And Schottenheimer didn't just win 200 games. He had a very good win percentage. I mean, so it isn't like he's sitting here with, you can make the case for Chuck Knox, who had 186 wins and he had 147 losses. I mean, Schottenheimer has 200 wins and 126 losses in one time. That's a 61% winning percentage. I mean, that's really remarkable.
Yeah, now listen, Schottenheimer's a tough. He's 4-13 in postseason play. 4-13. Lost a lot of home playoff games. Now, listen, a couple of them the Elway, I understand that. I think he's a very, very good regular season coach, and I don't think he's a very good postseason coach. That's the way I look at it. And so as a result, it makes it tricky.
I think too much weight is on that. I think too much weight is on that. I mean, look, and I just feel like, to me, when you start letting some other guys in the Hall of Fame who don't really meet that crowd. I mean, this is a lot of wins. I mean, there's a lot of wins. Marty Schottenheimer coached in 327 games. To win 200 of them is somewhat remarkable, and there's only 8 people again that have over that.
That's a good point. Good point. Yeah, good point. Do you think that, we know that John's a Hall of Famer. Do you think John's career is a little underachieving? That the Raiders 1-6 in championship games, as you said, only the one appearance. Do you think the Raiders? I know Miami and Pittsburgh. I understand that, but do you think he probably should have been able to get to another one?
Well, I mean, when you look at, I think a couple balls didn't bounce his way, right? He had some really tough losses, and I think a lot of what Coach Madden gets caught up in too is the fact that how great, that Al Davis was there too, the presence of Al Davis.
I think that hurts him. I think that hurts him.
And how much did Al contribute? It's what cost Flores. But when you look at Flores' 12-year coaching career, he's 97 and 87. He's 97 and 87. It's a 52% winning percentage coach. He just got into the Hall of Fame.
That's fair. He was terrible. He was terrible in Seattle. 100% right. 100%.
And it's one of the reasons why I don't think you see George Seifert get in.
Yeah, he was bad in Carolina. He was
horrible in Carolina. It's why it really took a long time for Hank Stram to get in. Now Hank Stram's only, Hank Stram won 131 games. And he's a 57% winning percentage coach. So I think we put so much on the whole essence of going and winning a Super Bowl. I mean, Mike Shanahan, for example, won 2 Super Bowls. He's got 170 career wins. Now he's a 55% winning percentage coach. But to me, he meets all the criteria.
Yeah, it's weird. They don't put Reeves in because he didn't win a Super Bowl and he coached that way, and they don't put Shanahan in. He won 2 Super Bowls. One of them should be in the Hall of Fame. 100%. That's an excellent point.
There's no logic to it. There's no logic to the selection process. I mean, look, George Allen. He won. He's a 71% winning percentage coach, but he's a 2-7 playoff coach.
Yeah, bad in the postseason.
And he was bad in the postseason, and he left the franchise in a worse shape after he left than when he got it.
He won in 2 places. He won in 2 places. He did win in 2 places, but I do understand where you're coming from. One with the Rams, one in Washington, and he's in because of that winning percentage. It's tricky. So interesting point. Bottom line is, you don't think John underachieved and definitely a Hall of Famer. That's what it comes down to. Right?
I think he advanced the game. He's a Hall of Famer, and I think that, to me, he coached in a very difficult situation. And the fact, as you mentioned, and I did, the Steelers in Miami, these are 2 hard teams to play during a very difficult era of football.
Good job with Mike Lombardi. That gets us started. We'll come back.
25 years of my life, and I'm not just talking about football, television, and sports. We shared so much stuff. We met at an NFL reception down in Arizona some 20 some years ago. He said to me, I really would like to work with you someday. And I guess a couple years later, he was doing the Super Bowl that took place in the Silverdome. And I did lunch, come host Saturday Night Live, instead of going home to California, get on the bus and come here. There wasn't a bus, there was to get on the train. And he said, okay, so we sent 2 guys out to ride the train with us from Detroit to New York. He came to New York and did Saturday Night Live. He was with us a week. It was a joy. We figured out ways to get him up the flights of stairs because he was never going to get into an elevator. He was more about claustrophobia than heights. And we had a ball, Eddie Murphy, and he did a couple of really funny things together on the show. And he and I then
interesting, that Super Bowl was 1981. And so he really, he had just gotten on the scene, yet you saw enough in that spot. You were doing Saturday Night Live, then executive producer. You saw enough in that little 2 or 3 year run for John that you had confidence that he could host that show, that iconic show on a Saturday night?
Oh, yeah. I mean, first of all, if you ever had been anywhere with John, like he used to love a place called Legends, which was a sports TV, hang out on the Upper East Side. And he entertained nightly there. He just was such a great conversationalist. And he was as recently as the weekend before last, when we were all together out in California. This was a man who was an honor student in college at a very, very esteemed technical college out on the West Coast. This guy surprised me all his life. Blessed him and not leaders teams to watch how he goes and does business. There's never been anybody in the game since who get insight to players. It happens, so it's a play for him.
Would he have been great as a broadcaster with anybody, or was he just with Summerall, the match made him even better? What's your take on that?
Well, I think he worked with two great broadcasters. With Summerall, he could not have been with anybody better at that stage in his career. Pat immediately understood John. They had a great time together. The two of them and the producer and director at the time of the CBS football package, they all loved to play cards. We played cards across the country. Sometimes on John's bus or in the town when they got there, John would got there first. They played some more cards. They all Pat was such an unassuming guy, such great company. John just soared when he was around him. And then Al is just as he is, natural. I mean, they just hit it off. Al was always so well prepared, and so was John. When they would get together on Thursday, the first day in New York City, it was unbelievable to watch just how quickly you could see almost everything they were going to do 3 days later on the year. They were prepared.
Could you, when you were in the truck and he was doing a game, did John follow the producer's role, director's role, or did the director-producer follow John's lead? How did that work?
Well, John wasn't any other figure in sports television related to football. John was the one who changed the whole way it was done. Back in the day, there were no visits to the team facilities before the week, a couple of days before the game was played. The sports information director would take the football TV people out for dinner or something like that, tell them the pronunciation of the names and stuff. That's when John came along and all the coaches said, I want to come to your practice. I want to talk to your players. None of that stuff had happened on a big scale before. And John made all that happen. So when John Madden came down, whether it was with CBS or NBC or Fox or ABC, they made every effort to open up their game. They would give them specific plays to well, but the coach away. But the coaches were more than eager to sort of give John a
Mr. Football for the next 30 years. I just never thought. I thought he was gruff, noisy, always yelling at the officials. I never thought that he would almost have a second career, that he would have a second life as this, huge football icon. And I never thought that watching him in the 70s. How about yourself?
He just had a way to inspire people, Chris. I mean, he inspired. You watch some of those NFL films, documentaries of seasons. I mean, the season that his team won their one Super Bowl. Watch the way he got inside the heads of all of those men and boys who were playing. I mean, he was a real on how to get them move in ways that they might not have ever done for anybody else. And it's a great credit to his friend, who most people don't understand at all, including me, Al Davis. His friend opened the door and let John do all this stuff. It wasn't like he was doing anything opposite what Al just let John be John. And he was to some of these guys like Stapler talk about what it was like to have John coaching, how he was inspired them every week in different ways. It's stunning. It's well worth watching all the docs about John's coach even now. It's just
I've watched it. I totally agree. If he hadn't won a Super Bowl, would he have been as a success as he was as a broadcaster?
I think he would. If anybody had ever put him in front of a mic and given him the reign that he had initially at CBS to work with the people that he was able to work with there, John made everybody around him always look better, Chris. And it didn't matter what network he was at. I mean, I think probably his greatest collaborator was Stelly. Stelly had him in Monday Night Football, and now had him for, 25 or 30 years of Sunday Night Football. But John could have been a film producer. Because he kept manipulating television people as well, and manipulating football players.
One last thing, Dick. He retired at the perfect time. So many broadcasters, as you know, hang on a little too long, and then it becomes a very difficult spot for the executive, or in your case, like a president like yourself, to have to sort of slowly move them along. We saw that with Gowdy. I mean, I hate to bring up the folks who hung around a year or two too long. He realized that maybe he was not necessarily losing his fastball, but he didn't want to be on the air when he was. And he retired at a perfect time and off a great game with Arizona and Pittsburgh. That's uncanny. A lot of guys wouldn't know how to do that. He did. Talk about that for a second.
Well, it was one of the most stunning nights of my life, because it was April, some months after the Super Bowl, when John called me at home. I was at our apartment in New York, and it was calling to tell me that he was done. It was time. He had he had done it, and it was just perfect the way it unfolded through the years, and particularly ending up doing Sunday Night Football, which he was doing now. And the highest development in US Cup, as I said. And I tried very hard. I was on the plane the next day, flew out to California, tried to talk about it, and I knew money would change. My son was unbelievably successful in his life outside of football. Chris, he was a great businessman, all kinds of acreage in Central California for raising grapes or pecans, all kinds of olives.
Wow.
Everything is successful. But in any case, I don't think John left for any reason other than the fact he really felt his time. And the timing was great. He got home in time. His mother was quite elderly. He got to be home for her final years. He got to be home to be with his wife Virginia for all these years. I mean, like so many things in John's life, even in retirement, he started with his second life.
100%. Dick, great job. Thanks for a little update here. We needed it in the worst way. It's good to hear your voice again. Stay healthy. Good to talk. Happy New Year. Appreciate you coming on.
You too, Chris. Bye.
Take care. Dick Ebersol. Thoughts on John Madden. Lots to do. Good to have you aboard on a busy program. We will continue on this Wednesday right after this. Don't go.
And he formed it. It wasn't a video game
Raider games. He had an NBA game, Bird versus Magic. He had a baseball game with Earl Weaver, and he approached us about doing a football game. Well, John Madden football. They really wanted to use John's plays from the Raiders, playbooks from his Raider days, and we met with them. We thought nothing would come of it. First of all, they could not put 22 players on the street, and they didn't have enough feature memory to do it. John said, "I'm not putting my name on the game that is not realistic. It doesn't have 22 players on it." So he never thought it would amount to anything. I think John and I probably would admit that we kind of fell into it, wanted to split, and since then, from '89 when it first came out to now, we sold over 110 million copies of Madden football around the world. The second largest video game in the world is FIFA, and it's been John's had 3 great careers: a Hall of Fame coach, an Emmy Award-winning broadcaster, and really for many football fans out there, they just know him as a video game guy.
He moved around network to network, and part of it because, networks lost the rights to the games. I know the last move was tricky when he went to NBC. Were all these moves tricky, or most of them seamless when he went from network to network?
Well, it really depends where, CBS produces football, remember, in 90.
Right, 92.
So they lose this slot to get, we don't have a choice here. So essentially, we were, at that point, we had conversations with ABC about sort of Monday Night Football, and then Rupert Murdoch called. And Rupert Murdoch essentially said, how much do you want to come to Fox? Just give us the number, I'll call you back in 5 minutes. That's essentially how the deal, that's the way Rupert Murdoch plays poker. And, look, John loved Monday Night Football when he was there. He certainly loved Sunday Night Football and working with the executives and everything. So, 4 o'clock spot on a Sunday. The late game on a Sunday. Here's CBS when he did Giants, Giants, Eagles, and then, moving to Fox. He really loved Sunday afternoon games, and he was able to go with Pat to Fox, able to bring Bobby Kennedy, Andy Grossman, Richie Zions, Michael Frank, his whole group of CBS with us. And that's I would say it was tricky, but he certainly had options. And I think, once NBC got Sunday Night Football, if you remember, ESPN, ABC gets Sunday night and Mondays. NBC gets Sunday. And then at the time, Disney said to us, well, we have Joe Theismann and John Madden. Not sure who we're going to really go with. And I had a conversation with Dick Ebersol shortly after that. And once you open the Dick Ebersol door, you just go in that direction. And we did that. And I think it was a great run with
The Amtrak to the Madden Cruiser. How did that work out?
Well, the Amtrak worked out okay. It was just a little slow. Coast to coast, 72 hours. And that's if you bought the change of train in Chicago, which was on to meet a lot of great Americans, to see what a great country we have. And I think it really helped keep him grounded and keep him really in tune with Americans and American football fans.
Quickly, Sandy, last thing. I'm very impressed with his 2 boys. The times I've seen him here in the last, whatever it might be, 4 or 5 days. And for a father who wasn't around a whole hell of a lot, he raised the kids with his wife well. Tell me about that real quick. Go ahead.
Well, John was a great father, and he cared. As one of his sons said, he used a word to describe it. And look, for me, I lost my dad 28 years ago. John was the second father to me, and I just think to know John Madden is to know that you have a friend for life, you have relatives for life, and he just was always there for his kids. Even if he was out of town, he was always in touch, he always cared, and always in every conversation with them, love you, and he just, a lot of people know that the guy that owns the band, Joints and all that. I think for those of us who were in the circle, John Madden was a great person, an intimate person, and one of the greatest
Bradshaw just told me. Not a good businessman. This is a top class, top flight businessman. Is that correct?
Well, he knew a little bit about everything. You know, if I had an issue or a problem with anything, I'd call him, and within 30 seconds, he'd give me the right answer, and I'd hang up the phone and say, you know, why didn't I figure that out? And he had a way of making things simple and easy and special.
Well done, Sandy. Good luck for your Michigan team. Thanks for a few minutes. Always a pleasure, pal. Appreciate
All right,
you coming on.
Doggy. Love you.
Sandy Montag, Dick Ebersol, Ted Shaker, Lombardi and Sims, Eddie and Sean McChesney. Happy New Year, everybody.